The year is 1999, and you are starting your first day on the job as an internet enforcer in Hypnospace, a corporately owned version of the internet accessed while you sleep. Your job is to trawl web pages for any violation of Hypnos terms of service and report them to moderators. You are paid in Hypnocoin, which can only be spent in, you guessed it, Hypnospace. Hypnospace is inspired by how the early internet really worked. Like GeoCities, there is a directory in the form of zones, but instead of being user-created, they are dictated according to Merchantsoft's bland corporate logic. For users who want to hide their pages that don't conform to the strict rules, there are other ways to discover them, lending to the pretty, unintuitive detective work that informs the gameplay. Its game design is very different from the typical player-centered design model, where the development of a game is focused on the design of systems that satisfy the user. It's an example of player-decentered design, meaning its user-unfriendliness is an essential part of the world building. Its purposely clunky UI, which is prone to viruses, reflects the CEO's lack of ability or desire to create a useful product. There is no clear way to progress through the game, and no tutorial other than how to be an effective enforcer. What's more, you don't really understand until the end that you've been operating as one of the bad guys all along, propping up the powers that be. There's no gameplay to master here, no levels to ascend. It's you against the world. Users are just learning how to act online amid Y2K fears and a feeling that there is something sinister under the surface of Hypnos, including in the way it's meant to be accessed. It's in this liminal space which the narrative designer says allows for so many emotionally varied experiences for both the player and the users. The seniors of Goodtime Valley are mostly widowers or empty nesters who revel in the ability to connect with others. Their pages are filled with expressions of conservative values, as well as their ineptitude as to how Hypnospace actually works. Poor Mavis just has no clue. Carl repeatedly falls victim to hacks and hoaxes. Nowhere in your Enforcer handbook does it direct you to actually help protect these people. Why would there be? They are the perfect victims primed to be exploited for corporate gain, Merchantsoft's MO. The main source of drama here is over the banning of images of a gumshoe gooper, seen as a violation of free speech and an attack on patriotism. Most of the goopers are found on Abby's page, a teacher who posts fan art from her students. She is furious with Merchantsoft, when she should be angry at the creator, whose removal of the image from public domain is seen by resident socialist Howard as an act of solidarity. He is let down when Gooper comes back as a Hypnospace partner brand. Sandy doesn't really understand the implications of not joining the I Stand with Gooper movement, and her bid for community leader and her Hypnospace subscription ends because of it. Teentopia, the place for teens and at least one child, is riddled with harassment, product placement, and catfishing. Counselor Ronnie, moderator and only adult, is actually a hoax by a Merchantsoft employee to obtain a government grant for having educational content. Bad boy Zane repeatedly harasses Tiffany, but this doesn't seem to count as the sort of harassment that Hypnospace is interested in enforcing until she starts harassing Hypnospace to do something about it. When it finally does get reported, the violation points are added to Tiffany's account, with Dylan shirking responsibility. There are other examples of misogyny scattered through Hypnospace operations right through to the top. Samantha, the only female employee, as well as the only one who seems capable and sane, is dismissed in conversations with management and then reassigned out of the way when her requests are perceived as nagging. If you are playing as a female enforcer, the Merchantsoft survey will say you are not qualified to complete it and will abruptly end. This anti-women in tech sentiment echoes the 2019 Blizzard scandal, a video game company that was sued for widespread and constant sexual harassment of female staff. The president, Bobby Kotick, claimed to know nothing, and in fact knew everything, just chose to do nothing about it. Adrian and Dylan Merchant represent the two poles of the kinds of bad bosses you might find in an emerging tech company. Adrian is culturally out of touch and only cares about profits, where Dylan is a tech-savvy visionary, more concerned with being the cool boss than with any semblance of professionalism. Without anyone to hold him accountable, he ends up installing his dangerously buggy side project into Hypnospace headbands, causing several users to literally have their minds blown when the year hits 2000. Instead of owning up, Dylan frames notorious but harmless teen hacker Timogeddon and spends the next 20 years denying any wrongdoing. When Dylan eventually apologizes, it's only because the evidence is so undeniable that he has no other choice. It was an employee walkout and open letter that made Kotick walk back his denial of allegations, and CEO of game developer Bungie only apologized after a report detailed a toxic work environment spanning 10 years. In this world, whistleblowers get punished, innocents get blamed, and the only consequences are the ones the user never signed up for that the CEO knew about all along. Sound familiar? Zuckerberg's choosing not to change course in the face of evidence out of fear it would harm engagement mirrors Adrian's passiveness, while his attempts to discredit the whistleblower are more Dylan style. On its face, Hypnospace Outlaw is a neat little internet simulator of a bygone virtual era. Through playing the game, you realize it's not quite our past that's being simulated, but a slightly alternate version that mirrors our present dystopian reality of how our own techno-corporate overlords fail us in regard to moderation, censorship, and the capitalist treatment of workers and consumers. Without a regulatory body to hold these companies accountable, we rely on whistleblowers, or else the users must join together to make a scene. In Hypnospace, Abby starts a movement. The hacker group Minx fights against Merchantsoft in a style of our own anonymous collective. When Adrian merges 5 geeky zones into one mainstream-friendly one, the users revolt and start their own independent zone. When Twitter decided to block Donald Trump, it was following immense internal and external pressure, and it took one billionaire to buy the largest stake to likely reverse it. Likewise, this little Kickstarter-funded game by a motley crew of developers is uniquely able to criticize our own flawed world in a more dynamic way than other traditional dystopian media. By combining game mechanics and narratives, the player becomes an active participant in creating and perpetuating the dystopia. Through recreating the past, Hypnospace Outlaw imagines a possible future we are heading for, and in many ways are already living.
Councillor Ronnie reporting for